Hello, good evening. It is February 7th, 2021. All you Rye Historical Society super fans out there, we are excited for the Super Bowl. I am wearing, as you can see, my Patriots jersey because I don't know what else to wear on Super Bowl Sunday other than Patriots gear, and I am a Patriots fan. So without the Patriots in the Super Bowl, it's hard to know who to support. Do we support Tom Brady and a new team? Do we not support Tom Brady? Do we support Patrick Mahomes? Perhaps the future of the NFL. It's up to you, really. Let us begin the reading. Chapter 20, Ari Onassis, oil supertankers off Rye. In late 1973, Onassis and his Olympic Refineries, Inc. oil company began to act on plans to build a $600 million, 400,000 barrel a day oil refinery on 1,200 acres in Durham, New Hampshire. Durham borders Great Bay, a tidal estuary that empties into the Atlantic Ocean at Portsmouth. It was the time of a critical oil and gasoline shortage brought on by OPEC's oil embargo. There were long lines at filling stations across the nation. Just before important town meeting votes in early 1974, wrote John Kingsbury, founder and former director of the Isles of Shoals Marine Lab, Federal Energy Administration Director William E. Simon telegraphed this message to New Hampshire Governor Meldrum Thompson Jr. Congratulations on the progress you are making in New Hampshire toward the construction of a refinery in your state. This forward step in your progress with the proposed nuclear generating station will substantially help our country achieve energy independence by 1980 in accordance with the president's goals. Olympic was quick to use the message in its advertising. Onassis's plan was to build his refinery at Durham Point, possibly supply it with fresh water from Lake Winnipesaukee, and then pump oil products back and forth to the terminal at the Isles of Shoals through pipelines traversing Great Bay, Newington, Portsmouth, and Rye. Wow, that would have been terrible. The pipeline's final leg would have crossed the ocean floor from Rye to a supertanker terminal at the Shoals. Writer Robert Whitaker reported that two 48-inch pipelines would bring Saudi Arabian crude oil in from offshore monobuoys located just inside the lee of the Isles of Shoals. The refinery's output would have been approximately equivalent to the output of all the refineries in New Jersey, which is 400,000 barrels per day, and it could have met 25% of total New England demand for petroleum products. Kingsbury recalled that public statements indicated that the refinery could be built and operating by 1976. Just an aside, of course, on Super Bowl Sunday, beer is the cocktail of choice. The Onassis people had begun quietly buying options on land, claiming it was for a future wildlife preserve just weeks before plans for the project went public. The newspaper Public Occurrences broke the story of the proposed refinery after many Durham Point landowners had already been approached by Onassis representatives about selling their land. Whitaker wrote that purchase options at a projected price of $6 million had been secured in the area of Little Bay on 3,500 acres, 20% of Durham's land. Options had also placed on about 700 acres, 8% of Portsmouth's land, not counting Pease Air Force Base. A large swath of land in Rye had been optioned across town to the shore at Concord Point. Rye was one area where options for land were bought, as 9 pipelines between Concord Point and the Shoals, plus a number of truck terminals, would be needed there. This statement negated the impression many had that the only coastal intrusion would be one small harmless pipe carrying oil from offshore to the Durham terminal. John Kingsbury stated that besides the two 48-inch pipelines bringing crude ashore, there would also be a 42-inch pipeline for taking ballast water ashore and another of similar size for returning it, together with all refinery process water to the offshore terminal. The refinery water would therefore have been discharged somewhere in the oceans without any American control. Product pipelines would include one or more for liquefied gas going to the truck terminal proposed at Interstate 95 at Portsmouth. The truck terminal would have to handle 400 trucks a day and, said Kingsbury, would be located on the final approach to the main runway at Pease Air Force Base. There would have been 4 pipes for refinery products, a 36-inch pipe for number 6 oil, a 30-inch pipe for number 2 oil, a 24-inch pipe for leaded gasoline, and a 24-inch pipe for unleaded gasoline. Also, in its initial information releases, Olympic stated it needed 6,000 gallons of fresh water per minute for its refinery. Water experts pointed out that this amount was more than the total of all the communities and cities in the area were currently using, writes Kingsbury. Rye resident Barbara Seeley's mother, Frances Tucker, and her sister, Bernice Remick, then owners of the 42-acre Remick farm, told Onassis no when he came in 1973 with a request to purchase an option to run pipeline through her land. They then sold the property to the Rye Conservation Commission at the low price of $12,000 so that it could remain open space forever. It contained sensitive marshes, 2 historic sites, the Brackett Road Massacre Graveyard, and the ruins of a historic colonial tide mill, and a mature coastal forest. Even in the midst of the transaction, one of Onassis's lawyers approached Commission member Talman to see if the Conservation Commission would allow the pipeline to go through. At the Alza Shoals, owners of 5-acre Lunging Island were unfairly tempted, as the town of Rye had just raised their taxes from $74 to $1,043 in 1 year, finally abated to $643. They feared losing their island to eminent domain, and the Olympic refinery people guaranteed them lifetime access to the island, which the owners would not have had if the town took the property. The Portsmouth Herald of December 13, 1973, contained this headline: "Olympic has island, option at Shoals." It reported that Mr. and Mrs. Robert Randall of Danvers, Massachusetts, had given Olympic Refineries a 5-year option on the island. Mrs. Randall was a 50-year summer resident of Lunging and a historian of the Isles. One of their sons was buried there. John Kingsbury reports that plans were for 90 supertankers per year just off Lunging Island and 170 smaller tankers annually just southwest of Appledore Island. Wow. Eugene Harlow, another Olympic consultant, said that the firm was trying to buy Star Island or White Island at the Alza Shoals, but neither of the islands would be necessary to setting up the offshore buoy terminal for supertankers, only helpful. An official of the Star Island Corporation that owns Star Island, when asked about this comment, said the only way the firm would ever sell the island was over our dead bodies. The sentiments of Rosamond Thaxter, owner of Smutty Nose Island, were similar. "Only over my dead body will anyone unload tankers there." John Kingsbury said, the project was not to stop with the refinery alone. Additional quantities of crude were to be received for transshipment to other East Coast destinations in smaller vessels. The refinery would also attract petrochemical plants that would supply New England with many additional products. The Onassis people quickly won over New Hampshire Governor Thompson with visions of wealth and prosperity for his state. Thompson's goal soon became to bring to Durham the largest oil refinery ever started from scratch anywhere in the world. Thompson had also been told that Onassis was considering the establishment of an anti-pollution laboratory in connection with the refinery to be operated by the University of New Hampshire. On December 19, 1973, Aristotle Onassis arrived for a one-day aerial tour of the sites, an event reported in the next day's Portsmouth Herald. One biographer said of him, as he went down the path of success with the logic of Narcissus, sure of always going the right way and oftentimes feeling omnipotent, he faced rivals in courts of justice, democracies, and colonels. Few people in their lives have come across such a crescendo of power. At a reception at the Sheraton Wayfarer Inn in Bedford, Onassis was welcomed by the Support Our Refinery group. Said SOR supporter and Durham resident Leslie Jewell, quoted by the Herald's Jane Andrews, "What else is this land good for down here? It's all ledge and swamp, and you can't even grow a cucumber." Onassis answered concerns of opposition group Save Our Shores and its leader Nancy Sandberg by saying the refinery would be as clean as a clinic. He said he was using the latest technologies to make the refinery as unobtrusive as possible and much more modern than any other East Coast refinery, the newest of which was built 17 years ago. Onassis added, "We have the technology to make this refinery look almost like a beauty parlor." Kingsbury recalled that when Olympic was asked how its 3 200-foot refinery stacks would look in the area, Mr. Onassis said the stacks with their warming lights would be as pretty as a Christmas tree on the winter horizon. Olympic Refineries consultant Robert Green said that the facility would be made to blend in with its surroundings on Great Bay, but added that 5 or 6 smokestacks might be 290 to 300 feet high. Perhaps Green was a comedian. Representatives of Olympic Refinery had come armed with $2 million in public relations funds to help win over people. In spite of this, opposition quickly grew. Landholders claimed they were lied to about the purposes of the options on the land and would not honor the agreements. Newspapers, legislators, and prominent citizens came out against the idea. The January 4th, 1974 Portsmouth Herald reported that the Portsmouth Conservation Commission had just unanimously approved and issued a statement in flat opposition to the proposed oil refinery. The commission felt that because Portsmouth was bordered on 108,490 linear feet, which is 20.55 miles, by tidal waters along the shore of the Piscataqua River, Little Harbor, and Sagamore Creek, even minor spills cumulatively would destroy the extremely sensitive coastal vegetation. This was not the official city position, since any policy decision would have to come from the Portsmouth City Council. The New Hampshire Commercial Fishermen's Association voted 31-5 against the refinery. and donated $100 from its treasury to the concerned citizens of Rye to help fight the proposal. Lobsterman Norman Foy, whose family owned Cedar Island, is quoted in Kingsbury's book. Eventually, there will be a terrific oil spill, and then people living on the New England coast won't have to buy any oil. They'll be able to bail it off the coast. Put me and my sons down as being against any oil terminal anywhere near the shoals. John Wyden, Rye harbor master, and at that time lobsterman for 32 years, had strongly opposed a supertanker terminal at the Isles of Shoals. Any oil spillage would end up right here on the beach because of the prevailing southerly and easterly winds. I don't think they can operate without spills. The best of operations are not foolproof. He also noted that if blasting was necessary to dig a trench for the pipeline along the seabed, the concussion would kill everything in the immediate area. Wyden emphasized the town of Rye would need special cleanup equipment for oil spills. We can't rely on the federal government or the Coast Guard to clean up an oil spill. He also felt that the risk of oil spills would lead to property devaluation in all of Rye because visitors would no longer find the area desirable. Back in the early 1970s, more than half of the taxable residences in Rye were vacation homes. Lobsterman Lloyd Hughes had SOS for Save Our Shores written on his boat. Kingsbury wrote that Professor Fred Hochgraf, a specialist in pipeline metals from the University of New Hampshire, spoke at public meetings about benefits, dangers, and costs in moving oil by pipeline. He pointed out particularly the difficulty of protecting a pipeline from the shore to the shoals, necessarily going directly across the Portsmouth Ship Channel, against damage by anchor, and recommended that the state adopt stringent pipeline construction standards, as it had none. Indicated Kingsbury, it became clear that each supertanker would be physically as large or larger than 2 of the 3 islands of the New Hampshire shoals, and would look higher on the horizon as seen from the mainland than any of the islands themselves. These tankers and their support vessels would occupy much ocean previously devoted to lobstering, fishing, recreation, and marine study, to the detriment and possibly the total exclusion of fishermen, party boats, and the Shoals Lab. They also brought the real threat of a major oil spill. Kingsbury noted that the Canadian government had found it impossible to recover more than a fraction of the cost of cleaning up after the grounding of the Olympic Arrow off the coast of Nova Scotia in 1970. That was disputed by Olympic. And that the company nominally owning the vessel was dissolved 2 days after the grounding. Apparently, each of the Onassis vessels was technically owned by a separate holding company established for that purpose alone. According to Kingsbury, an informational meeting held January 23, 1974 by the town of Rye brought out over 1,000 people. It was said to be the biggest turnout since the first transatlantic cable came ashore at Rye. Many were turned away. Kingsbury felt that the Olympic presentation was inept. A film presented for Rye residents showed the building of a deepwater terminal off Kuwait. About a square mile of shore seemed to be taken up by churning tractors and other devastating machinery. While the smooth-toned announcer said at one point that an occasional stubborn rock had to be dealt with, a huge dynamite explosion was shown close to shore, sending a mass of water to the skies. One could see the citizens of Rye comparing that with the fact that there is little but rock between Concord Point and the shoals. Since Olympic had assured the town of Durham that if it didn't want the refinery, it didn't have to have it, town officials asked Olympic to similarly assure Rye. The Olympic representative said that this involved a major policy decision that had to be made in New York. This did not sit well with the citizens of Rye. Wrote Kingsbury, I think Olympic's trademark backfired too. It consisted of an outline map of New Hampshire with a bullseye of concentric circles over the seacoast area. On March 6, 1974, 90% of those voting in Durham opposed the project in a town meeting referendum by a vote of 1,254 to 144. Kingsbury recalled that before this meeting, Olympic officials admitted that despite the earlier promise not to proceed if citizens did not want the refinery, they would build it over the objections of the town if the state permitted. Rye residents also overwhelmingly defeated the proposal by a vote of 1,073 to 194. Meeting a day later, the state legislature voted not to overturn the Durham vote. The nearby town of Newmarket, which did not have Durham's 10,000-student University of New Hampshire enrollment to boost its economy, wanted to have its town consider the project. At a town meeting, Newmarket residents approved the idea of a coastal refinery by a vote of 575 to 355, and went the extra step of approving Onassis's Durham proposal by a vote of 523 to 401. The Newmarket Board of Selectmen had apparently been assured by the governor's office that if Newmarket citizens supported the refinery, the town would be suggested to Onassis as a site. Rochester had apparently also been considered as an alternative to the Durham Point site. Rochester Mayor John Shaw said earlier on December 19, 1973, that he would like to see the facility built on a 4,000-acre marsh next to the Rochester Country Club. To help seal matters, on March 7th, state legislators passed New Hampshire House Bill 18, reaffirming that towns would have home rule rights in deciding on large projects, such as an oil refinery, today cited as RSA 31:109. Local option for oil refineries sitting in towns. From New Hampshire Revised Statutes annotated. Stung by these defeats, the people from Olympic Refinery moved back to New York on March 8, 1974, and the project died. The Save Our Shores group held a reunion in August 2001 on Star Island at the Isles of Shoals to celebrate the defeat of the Onassis Plan and their preservation of area land that remains largely unchanged 30 years later. Writes Kingsbury, who was there at the reunion, exactly why Olympic Refineries did the things it did in New Hampshire may never become public. He also presents this enigmatic question. Does energy-hungry New England have a moral obligation to pay the environmental costs for a large refinery? Writing in Land of Lost Content, Robert Whitaker says, a television biography of Onassis's life claimed this defeat, the first major one of his career, had contributed to the rapid decline in his health. However, also pressing hard on Onassis's spirit was the recent death of his son, Alexander, on January 22, 1973, in an airplane crash. Added to these losses were the slumping profits of his Olympic Airways due to the oil crisis and war on Cyprus. In 1974, Onassis pulled out of Olympic Airways. He died March 15, 1975. What is perhaps the most ironic part of the tale is Onassis's keen taste for whale hunting, since today's Rye Harbor has 2 boats full of excited, environmentally educated passengers going out for whale watching daily. In the early 1950s, this man had hired a fleet of ships to aggressively hunt and kill whales. Ships of his fleet did not follow rules. The Olympic Challenger began harpooning whales a month prior to the opening of the season and did not distinguish between little sperm whales and larger ones. His massacre of the whales continued for 3 years until 1954. Before heading for Peruvian waters, his crews had already accumulated 60,000 barrels of oil and captured 580 whales in the Arctic zone. When he went on to kill 3,000 whales in disputed Peruvian waters, that government slapped him with a fine he could easily handle, $2,800. In both cases, with the threat of gulls and seals off the Rye coast weaving between offshore oil terminals and with Onassis's fleet of dedicated whale killers, it is here that we find his instincts as a hunter, the enjoyment of capturing and destroying his prey. As one leaves Rye Harbor for the adventure of a whale-watching ride far out to sea, thoughts of Onassis's bitter loss of his beloved New Hampshire oil project taste especially salty sweet. Oh, that feels like a very appropriate way to end our reading this evening. So up next week will be chapter 21, the Aucomin Salt Marsh Restoration Project. So tune in next Sunday, 5 p.m. And until then, have a great week and enjoy the Super Bowl. Good night.